I love this movie, and I hate to refer to a movie I like so much as like with another movie, but it reminded me of Grand Canyon, which I know has come up in reviews and everything, and that's a really high compliment. I think Lawrence Kasdan did a marvelous thing, a kind of where we are snapshot, which dealt with a lot of the dilemmas that you deal with. I think you were able to take it further because I think things have gone further. And let's talk a little bit about where this idea comes from.
Well, from a lot of places, but I was in 1991, and I kept wondering about those two kids who'd stuck guns in my face, and over the years, they'd pop into my brain every year or so, and I just, who were they? Were they close friends? Did they think of themselves as criminals? Did they just meet that evening? Were they professionals, or is this just a one-off? And I never meant to write this movie. I just woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, 10 years later, and started to write about those kids and who they bumped into and who those people bumped into, and then all the other things that I'd witnessed or seen in Los Angeles in the last 28 years of living there.
One of the things that occurs to me is that there are moments of humor in the film that are quite marvelous, including when we meet these two young men, because they're just going on and they're ranting, and one of them turns out to be a rapper in another life, and they're just ranting, and we're saying, yeah, man, I see where you're coming from. Then of course you turn the situation on its head, which adds to to the impact of what happens. Talk a little bit about how you approach this material, because clearly the guys you had first seen probably didn't remind you of the characters you wind up creating.
Well, I think the movie's about contradictions. I mean, it's about the fact that we all embody contradictions. We think of ourselves one way, but in fact we don't really truly know who we are until we're tested. And that's what we try to do with all the characters. We tried to just put them in situations where they were tested, and then you saw which way they turned or twisted, and you never really could figure it out. I don't think the audience would be able to figure out which way these characters are going to go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just talk about your character.
Well, I mean, my character very much speaks to the notion of you don't know who you are until you're tested, which is a line that Matt Dillon essentially says to me in the film. And it's true. My character starts out full of conviction, somewhat self-righteous, imagines himself to be able to do the right thing or make the right decision at all times, and that's a byproduct of inexperience and youth. And over the course of the movie, the things that happen to him change him in some way, and ultimately profoundly.
How do you prepare for the role?
Well, for this one, it was less about preparation and less about the challenge for me than it was just the excitement of being part of something like this that you felt like I hadn't seen this movie before. I hadn't seen as diverse a landscape of characters before. And so that's where the majority of my enthusiasm and motivation came from, was like, I want this movie to be put out. I want the public to see it and have a reaction to it.
And that was the way with a lot of the actors that came on board. They just wanted to be a part of something that was different and something that asks questions to which we had no answers. And that's great stuff to explore. We hopefully cast actors that in roles that you haven't seen them in before, and we were able to explore parts of them that had been hidden, and it was a wonderful experience for me, working with actors that were so gifted and so talented, but hadn't done exactly this kind of character before.
I think one of the core situations that will grab all of the viewers of this film is when Thandie Newton's character is driving home with her husband, who's a successful TV producer, director, and they're having a moment in the car, which happens to be their car, but which happens to represent a car that's been stolen earlier that night. A car like that has been stolen, and they're stopped by police officers, one played by Ryan and one played by Matt Dillon. And I think if the movie really gets to people, that scene, the humiliation that's inflicted on those people by the Matt Dillon's character, and then how Ryan's character is forced not initially to react to it, and the delayed reaction of his character that cascades through the movie, of course, is a marvelous thing. Talk a little bit about what you're trying to do with those scenes and how the inspiration comes about. I know the writing process is hard to describe, but talk about the emotional beats that are involved and what you hope people will go through.
Boy, it's a tough one. I mean, we just tried to put these characters in situations where we'd expect them to have things that they should have dealt with before, but just in this case hadn't. And Tandy Newton was just such a wonderful actress, and you have Terrence Howard in there, who is such a raw and profoundly unique actor, and then you put them under this kind of pressure, and you think, oh, she's had one too many drinks, and they're having fun, and the most unexpected things happen. They're just a block from Ventura Boulevard. They're suddenly in great danger, and then how that affects them. It's you just, as a writer, you just keep trying to find unique ways to challenge the characters, and that's what we did.
Talk a little bit about your characters, various stages your character has to go through in response to that initial situation.
Well, I don't know. We start with these two guys, these cops who've been paired together and have completely different ideologies socially. But there's something I think they can both sort of learn from each other. The situation, I mean, at the time, I'm dealing with a partner who has more authority than I do, has a longer sort of tenure on the job, and and there's this thing with this honor code amongst police officers, where you don't really kind of you don't cross the blue line, you don't rat, you don't tell on another officer. So I think that's part of the dilemma. And then he finds the strength morally to kind of stand up and try to make a change, try to do what is right, and I think that's something that everyone can sort of relate to. Every character in this movie, there is an aspect to anyone in the audience. There's an aspect to their personality that they will connect to. I mean, that's what's so great about this film, and the fairness in which everyone is depicted, good and bad. I mean, it shows that we have those sides within us, all of us, and it's about when we decide or when the reactions cause which side to come out.
What's the most challenging scene for your character?
The most challenging scene, the scene in the cul-de-sac with Terrence was pretty powerful because it felt so real. The setting that we were shooting in a neighborhood that I was relatively familiar with, and you hear these stories all the time. We see on the news all the time in Los Angeles, police brutality and different, racially infused stories that go along with officers in Los Angeles. They're in a very difficult position, and so I think that day there was so much truth to Terrence's performance and to the situation that was overwhelming.
One of the things I think, Paul, I guess, is that you create so many memorable African American characters in a mainstream movie who are coming from so many different places. Ryan's commander in the police station, the guy he confronts in that neighborhood, that guy's wife, Don Cheadle's character. Don Cheadle turns out Don Cheadle's brother, the brother's companion in crime. There's so many of them that are there that represent a full spectrum. Talk a little bit about the development of those characters and how much of what have you witnessed and what is simply created out of your imagination.
Well, trying not to give too much away, but there was one incident that stuck out in my mind. I was on a studio lot, and I was walking towards a group of people who I knew, two white producers and a black director who was in their employ. And as I got closer, I realized that the white producer was telling a joke, a racist joke, to the black director, as if to say, see, we're all the same, we can say these things now. And as I just got closer, I realized I was just saying, no, you can't, you asshole. But I didn't say that, and I saw the the black director nod and half laugh and give him sort of a slap and turn and walk away. And I went, oh, what part of your soul did you just eat in order to keep your job, in order to get employed next week, do the next week's episode? And you see what we all go through in order just to, for these simplest reasons. You want to be able to take care of your family. You want to be able to get ahead in your career, and how much you're willing to eat in order to do that. And that goes across race lines. That's just all of us. So it was actually quite easy to write those roles. Bobby and I just did a lot of research. We read tons and tons of books. And then once you understand the given circumstances, it's easy to put yourself in that person's place.
Everyone will love Don Cheadle's character, and he's becoming emblematic of a man who can stand for so many complex things. He operates in such a low gear, though, that when his indignation starts to rise, we really feel it, because he seems to have such a placid surface. One of the things I was loved about is you give him lines with, I believe it's the girlfriend character in the bedroom, where he comes out and says something about Latin American immigrants that you'd expect a white guy to have said, but here he says it, and it's very effective. Talk a little bit about being able to do that, especially with this particular performer.
Well, what we wanted to say, and that we all harbor these feelings. We all, in the wrong situation at the wrong time, we will all say the most dreadful things. I've caught myself doing it, and we all, no matter how highly evolved we think we are, if we think no one's ever hearing, things come out of our mouths, and then you'd catch yourself going, "Oh my God, did I just say that?" Or you'd be with your dad, or you'll be with some friend, and they'll say something, and you go, "What?" You after years of knowing these people, you don't really know who they are, and that goes across all color lines. So that's things I've observed. I don't know.
No, I agree. I mean, it's like we'd all like to say, I don't have a racist thought, but there's a conditioning that goes on that maybe starts from generations past, that attitudes and mentalities that are carried over from a less sophisticated time, maybe socially, and and then there's also the notion of we are animals, and we have instinct, and we have defense mechanisms that arise based on unknown territories and unknown types of people, and I think that this movie kind of doesn't teach you, but in a way encourages you to think about maybe being a little more open, less judgmental, and to think before you react. To think before you speak, even.
Yeah, but it really is. It's all of us. I mean, every single character in this movie. I mean, no one leaves this movie unscathed, and no one is untouched by what's in their heart, with those deep, dark secrets. And that's the fun of the movie, I think, because there is a lot of awful humor in this film. There's a lot of things that people go, "Did they just say that?" And so it's oddly liberating when you get down and you just let everybody say whatever the hell they want, or there was scripted. When that truth starts to come out, even awful truths start to come out, it is liberating.
Talk about Matt Dillon in particular, who's quite marvelous.
Yeah, Matt, we just had to we had to walk him through every line. It was an embarrassing, man. It was just. How did you?
I have a pretty good Matt Dillon story.
Oh, what was yours? No, he was great. I'm kidding.
We did do a little bit of. We rode around with the LAPD a little bit to get a sense of the job, and there was a lieutenant who took us out. I sat up front and I wear a baseball cap because we get followed a lot in LA, Reese and I, and there's always people kind of pointing you out. Matt sat in the back of the squad car with no baseball cap on. I remember us driving around the city and we pull up at a stoplight, and this kid looks over and sees Matt Dillon in the back of a police car and immediately takes out his cell phone and starts dialing, calling all his friends to say Matt Dillon's just been arrested. And I thought it was a great moment. Like, man, you should have worn a hat, Matt it was interesting watching him play this part, because it's not an easy part to play, and I think it's there's a lot of ugliness to the character. There's some beauty, and it shows again that there's good and bad in all of us. But he really committed to it, so much so that he freaked me out going a few times. But
Talk about just the interaction.
Well, I mean, you know, he had to find the place of truth for this guy, which you find out throughout the course of the movie is grounded in some kind of emotion and grounded in his history with his father and that sort of thing. But Matt, you know, we grow up in this business. Matt also, he started when he was very young, and you are a very open person. Naturally, if you spend time in the entertainment industry, one of the beautiful things about it is really accepting. You meet all different kinds of people, and so to take yourself to a place of such limited sort of judgment and scope and the idea of perceiving and profiling people just based on the way they look, I think was a challenge for him. And, you know, he really tried to find out who this guy was. I mean, you meet racist people, you know, you work in the South, you work anywhere, you meet people who are like that, but I think it's difficult sometimes to identify them when you grow up in such a liberal sort of open atmosphere. And he really worked to find this guy.
Yeah, and it was interesting because he had to come from a place of saying no one is truly racist. We all just have these things we think, you know. And you know, he is, because I don't think I've ever met a character who says they're racist. I've never. They just believe that they know better than the rest of us about a certain group of people, or they don't make those generalizations. And we all do it. It's a strange thing, you know. We all do it, and none of us think. You know, we don't necessarily do it with race, but we do it with, you know, ethnicity or whatever. I mean, Germans bother me, but you're not German, are you? Exactly. I don't know. I'm kidding. Only at resorts. But we all harbor these kinds of things, and Matt, such a skilled actor, and he comes from a place where, as Ryan was saying, of really, you know, immersing himself in the character. And I know a couple of times before we started shooting, he'd be, you know, just getting himself ready to do it, and he'd be talking to me as the character, and you know, he's saying, you know, these people, you know, I'm doing them a favor, you know, what I'm doing here, because if they ran into a bad cop, you know, things could happen to these people, and you're going, Jesus Christ! You know, it was fascinating. And then to see him afterwards sit there after this scene they're talking about, he just sat down on the curb and he was shaking his head, and it was like it was the first time he was actually troubled by the scene. First time he allowed himself to think from his own perspective, other than the character's perspective about it, and he was sort of. I mean, he knows the difference between himself and the character, and we all do. But when you go into such dark places, it sometimes takes a moment or two to get back.
As I understand it, you're from Canada, and if that is the case, what extra layer do you bring? Because you've lived in L.A. for a long time, but it's not the same as being born there or being born in the U.S. What extra lens does that bring to this story?
Well, it's the Canadian lens. I mean, it's the. I've lived in Los Angeles for 28 years, and lived in Canada for 22, and I'm a citizen of both countries, and very proud to be both. But I think I still feel like an outsider in both countries, and that's a good thing for an artist. You just a half a step back from everybody else, and so you can judge yourself, but you can also go, wow, what just happened here? That was interesting. Well, everyone else is going, yeah, that happens. And so, I think it's terrific for an artist to be able just to be a little bit apart and not to be just too close to everything.
Now, as a screenwriter, you have to know when you're dealing with a story like this, as Lawrence Kasdan did with Grand Canyon, Robert Altman, the collaboration on Shortcuts, that the degree of coincidence involved in people's lives hooking into each other in a short period of time may bother some people in the audience and some critics. And it doesn't bother me, but it obviously is the long arm of coincidences involved here in a lot of things. Talk a little bit about how you confront that as a writer and what you do to mitigate it if you bother to.
Yeah. It was an allegory, so we didn't really worry too much about the specific coincidences. And we tried, if you actually track the things, you know, there's this person A runs into person B, who runs into person C, and person D, and then person D runs into person B. So it's not always these things that go around. So that, and you know, I often wondered when I was. I mean, one of the reasons I wrote this is because I started thinking about what happens to somebody a stranger after they leave your life. You're driving down the street and somebody cuts you off, and you give them the finger, and they yell at you, and then they go around the corner. You never see them again. So what happens to them now? I mean, now that you've stirred that up in them, what'll happen? Did they go home and get in a fight with their wife, or did they get in a traffic accident just over there? And did they bring that emotion with them? And so that I think is fascinating. I think there are many more coincidences in life than we realize, and they just happen just out of our vision. So.
What's the scene that you're most proud of as a writer-director, first-time director and a writer, in terms that really comes out on the screen the way you hoped it did, and the one you might have had the most apprehension about?
I think the scene with Ryan and Matt, the one we just been discussing, that was the scene where they pulled Tandy and Terrence's characters over, was the hardest for me, one of the hardest to write that Bobby and I wrote, and also one of the hardest to shoot, because it was a tough scene. It was graphic and it's tough, and it's very emotional. And I had a lot of apprehension about shooting that one. I really didn't want to shoot it at all. I just kept pushing it off and saying, we'll do it some other time. And while other ones, the big action scenes were dead easy for me, but that one was really tough.
Any words on that?
Well, I mean, everyone involved in the scene, treated it with respect and sensitivity the night we were shooting it, and everybody kind of felt uncomfortable, man. And that's what you want, though. You want to feel those, then you know something genuine's happening. Then you know there's some truth to what you're doing, If you could just walk away from a scene like that and go have a laugh, and, then you didn't put it all out there. You didn't really go there, and you didn't really feel it. And everyone did, on the crew, on the cast that night. It was definitely, it's disturbing. But life is in its moments often disturbing, and something that you were talking about, the coincidences, this is, as Paul said, an allegory. It's also a story. It's also entertainment. It's also, as much as it's meant to make you think and feel, it's also, he's telling a great story. And I've had the chance to work with Robert Altman on one of those ensemble movies like that. It's difficult, man. It's a really difficult trick to pull off, and Paul and his editor did it exceptionally well. The fact that you can track all of these people, you do stay connected to them, and you don't get lost when you've got such a diverse and such a wide range of different places and people. To me, that's an amazing achievement.
While I have you here, I've got to ask you about the wonderful collaboration of Igby Goes Down, and the brother you play to Kieran Culkin and the son of Susan Sarandon. Talk about that film, how you get that role, and how that particular meshing, that very dark comedy, comes about.
Well, I'm drawn to smaller films. I'm drawn to darker material, but more aptly original material. Igby Goes Down initially came to me a few years prior to play Igby, and it took us so long to get the money for it that I was too old. But I acted almost as a producer on that film in terms of getting the financing, making calls, and bringing cast into it, because I wanted to see it made again. I mean, after a certain age, and I'd done, some things like I Know What You Did Last Summer and Cruel Intentions, and things that had some decent box office. I wanted to take whatever heft or influence I had from the performance of those films, and then try to get cool movies made, man. Just things I haven't seen before, filmmakers or voices that I believed in, and Igby was one of those. I just, it was a script that I fought and championed a long time, and I'm proud to say I helped them make it. So.
Describe those two brothers. The relationship of those two brothers. It's a very. We're now getting more sibling movies, and that's one of the better ones. The sibling relationship there.
Yeah, I mean, they're such different guys. I mean, it was also a situation where that movie came from the writer-director's life. He grew up in that world, in the high society New York world, where he's related to Al Gore, and Gore Vidal is his uncle, and Gore Vidal's in the movie, and so he's from that whole fabric of person. And
was Al Gore named after Gore Vidal, or was Gore Vidal named after?
Which came first? But no, the brother. I mean, that's the reason why I found that movie so compelling. I didn't have a brother; I had three sisters, and I always was fascinated by the idea that the two guys can grow up in a household and so close in age and really be so completely different and almost hate each other. I mean, I had friends growing up who would get into the most ridiculous fights. These brothers would be shooting BB guns at each other from 10 feet away, And so that whole thing of like the sibling rivalry thing and was fascinating to me. And there's love there, but a lot of animosity.
About Kieran Culkin working.
Fantastic. I mean, he blew me away in that film, and I had not really seen much of his work before, and I couldn't think of a kid more perfect to play that part.
And Paul, I wanted to ask you, of course, about Million Dollar Baby, because when I went in to see the film, I didn't know what it was. I just knew who was in it. And as soon as I sat down, I realized, oh, that's FX Tools' Million Dollar Baby. I wonder where we're going to take this. I wonder if they have the guts to take it where it goes. And I was amazed that you did, and I loved it because the first time I encountered your work. Talk about that piece, because it's such a powerful piece, especially when audiences don't know where it's really going.
Yeah, I'd read those stories in 2000, and just they moved me so deeply. I actually heard FX being interviewed on NPR, and I tracked down the stories and bought the rights, and knew that I wanted to make them into a film. It was tough going because I did want to be true to the short story. Of course, the short story is just Frankie and Maggie. There's nobody else in that story. There's no best friend. He doesn't have an estranged daughter. All those things were created, but I knew I wanted to stay close to the core of something I thought was just wonderful and profound. Yeah, well, the Morgan Freeman character was an inspiration. After about 7-8 months working on the screenplay and just banging my head into the brick wall, I finally realized I had to find a way to get these stories out and to create, a friend for Frankie that he could speak to and who could then narrate the piece. And I came up with the idea of the letters in order to not to be. I hate narration that is just narration, and so I wanted to have an emotional reason for the narration and a sucker punch at the end, because that's what the film was about. It's about these twists and turns in our lives, these unexpected things that happen, but should be completely expected. It's a dangerous game, and it all seemed to fit. It took about 8 or 9 months to write the script. We got Morgan on board quickly, and it took another 2 or 3 years for me to get Hillary. And then finally, Clint came on, and then as soon as he was on, 10 months later, it was on the screens.
Finally, talk about Clint Eastwood and his Catholicism, the character's Catholicism, and how in many ways he's true to it, despite the apparent opposite.
Yeah, no, that was important. I mean, having grown up as a Catholic, I had great respect for the religion, and wanted to talk about a man who was a daily communicant, who really deeply believed who he was, that he was a spiritual being, and that he had an immortal soul, and that was what was at risk in this film. It was because if it had to go to the territory it went, if he had to make the decision, which he makes, which is anathema to him, which is the worst possible decision he could make. I wanted to stack all the odds against him making that decision, and have him know that if he made that decision, he would lose his soul, the one thing he valued most in life, and he'd lose the girl that he so treasured. And so once I knew it was the decision was that hard, then I could have him make it.
And finally, what is gained and what is lost for the characters in French?
Oh, I'm going to let the audience decide that. I think, I just wanted to leave the film. I wanted to start the film at points of crises, and I wanted to leave people where they didn't have fully formed answers. They were just starting to realize what had happened, and let that sort of sink into them. And I think somehow that makes a film, and a pretty entertaining one. So, but I really like films in which the audience can participate and can go outside and talk about it with their friends, or as Ryan was saying, go get a drink with 4 of their buddies afterwards and argue about it and talk about it. Every person who sees this film that I've seen so far has a different perspective on it, and the things that affect them. People come up and go, "Oh, that one scene really got me," or "This 2 lines over here really got me," and that's great. I love those kinds of films.
And finally, one last question for Ryan: What was the fate of the film, as you recall, 54, that I think had problems? It was good for you,
Right.
Not for the director.
What was the fate?
Yeah. What happened to that film? As far as you can just see it?
Well, I mean, it's art versus commerce kind of thing, where they had, this movie about a nightclub that was really progressive, really wild, and they had filled it with, kind of poppy sort of, household names like Mike Myers and Nev Campbell, and so they wanted Mike Myers and Nev Campbell's audience, but it was difficult to do with the subject matter, with the drugs and everything else, the sex that was going on. So they kind of just watered it down and made something in between, based on testing it for mall audiences and whatever. I mean, I thought we were setting out to make something akin to Boogie Nights or, along those lines, and I think there was a version that was like that somewhere. somewhere, but you know, it's like people get in there and they have their own ideas, and it happens, man. You learn from it.
I just thought that there was a missing picture there somewhere.
Yeah, there definitely was. They took out the whole the homosexual relationship my character had. They got kind of afraid of it, and they took it out. And it's funny. They wanted to delve deep and they wanted to make something exciting, but they just ended up pulling all the punches.
How substantial was that gay subplot that they took out?
Relatively. I mean, it wasn't the movie by any stretch, but it was substantial enough. I mean, it was also evanescent of that time and what was happening. His sexuality was so, I don't know, fluid. People were doing anything with everyone, and I think they didn't feel like audiences were ready to digest that, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. It was very